So I've been like in a for real like Hunger Games phase recently. I've just like constantly just been immersing myself in Hunger Games media. And so then I wanted to make a video about it. So The Hunger Games, for those who are like not aware, or maybe they don't remember everything about it, it was written by Suzanne Collins. It's a dystopian trilogy set in like a future altered version of North America. The country that the characters are in is called panem, which is actually Latin for bread, as in the phrase panem et circenses. I don't know if I said that right. I don't know Latin. It's a dead language. Panem is made up of 12 districts, or 13 technically, and one capital, ruled by a very power-hungry President Snow. So the people of the capital, they're rich beyond imagination. They're like dressed in luxury. They like attend like, I don't know, galas and shit. Feasts? I don't know what to call them. They attend rich people parties. They have no needs, no fears, like no stresses besides like, oh my god, how am I gonna do my hair today? This of course comes at the expense of the districts. Each district has its own specific like purpose, and like it's basically meant to be so that each district is like separate from each other, but they all like help the capital, not themselves. As you can imagine, these like social differences makes it so that the people in the districts and the capital just naturally behave differently than each other. And that's where like the idea for this video essay comes from, the idea of like identity and individuality and how that plays a part in the events of the Hunger Games trilogy. I have not read The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes yet, so don't crucify me for this, okay? I'm just saying that as a preface to be like, this information is coming from the original trilogy. If I see any like Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes spoilers in my comments, I will just like reach through the screen and evaporate you from Earth. So in panem, there's a very strong idea of there being like a difference between the people in the capital and the people in the districts. And the most basic way to understand this is the way that they are dressed. The people in the capital have like their own specific, unique styles. Like everyone is dressed different. Everyone has like tinted skin, different hair colors, like alterations done to their body, like stuff like that. They all want to be like as unique as possible. And of course, on the opposite end, we have the people in the districts, the people like the workers in the districts. They're visibly like, if you look at them, you're like, yeah, they're less privileged than the people in the capital. They wear like commonplace, regular clothes, things that are like practical for their everyday needs. And so they don't really care about how special or different they look. They're just like, I need to wear whatever I can afford and whatever will get me through like my tasks for the day. And so because of this, the capital citizens have a very strong sense of identity. The capital people are worried about, how can I be the most special person in the room right now? How can I stand out from this crowd? How can I make sure that even though I'm walking with a bunch of people who are all just as rich as me, like I'm gonna be different somehow? And then the people in the districts have more of a communal sense of identity. This is shown a lot like with Katniss, in the books especially. She really emphasizes the idea of people in the Sham. Is that how you say it? Sham? Like Shan? People in the Sham are like very loyal to each other, I guess. They work together. They are a community. And so these people in the districts are more used to being one in a crowd and not really worrying about sticking out. They're just trying to like self-preserve, I guess. They have more like real issues to worry about. A lot of kids in 12 like die of starvation. I mean, even the ones who are like better off, the ones in town, in 12 specifically, because we don't really get a lot of insight into other districts, but like for 12, even the better off ones in town are still poor. Peeta even says like in the first book, like usually what his family eats is stale bread, and then like the squirrels that they buy from Katniss. And so this strong sense of like individuality, of like personal identity, is what keeps the capital citizens in check for the government's sake. They feel detached from the rest of Panem, and this is purely based on social statuses. They feel above the people in the districts. And so they watch the games with like a sense of separation, and this is necessary in order for them to like comply with what the government is doing. They feel detached. They don't feel like, oh my god, like these are real people, like this is horrible. They don't really fully understand the atrocities that are happening. It's just purely entertainment for them. And they feel justified in it because they have the government on their side. The government tells them these are the people who went against us in the dark days. So they're just being punished for like what they did. They feel privileged and they feel like they're on the right side of history, and then those in the districts are on the wrong side. They never have to worry about sending themselves or their loved ones into the games. And then on the other hand, the more camaraderie sense of like community that the people in the districts That's what keeps them in check for the government, because they're like, oh, I'm just one person in a crowd. I can't really make a difference. Like, we're just kind of having to go along with it. We're overpowered by our government. They feel like a cog in a wheel, you know, instead of like a person. But honestly, what's interesting is that this idea of like being a community is also kind of what set off the motions of rebellion. As I said earlier, people in the districts feel very loyal to their own people, and like Katniss broke this. She showed like the people in 11 with Rue's death, she showed them like even though they were from different districts, she still was like loyal to her. So the people in 11 felt a sense of loyalty to Katniss as well. This was unheard of. People from different districts didn't really talk to each other, which is what Snow and the government wanted. They wanted them to feel separate. They wanted them to feel like their own like little groups that were supposed to be just like with each other. And then Katniss like broke these barriers, even though she didn't really mean to. She was just being herself, you know? But I digress. I'll go more into that later. And then we have like career districts 1, 2, and 4. Those are the ones like surrounding the capital. As far as I know, this is the official map of panem. At least it's what I found online. And it makes sense to me based on what the book says. But most of the capital's like surroundings consist of districts 1 and 2. And then 5 and 9 are just kind of touching it. And then 4 is on the other side of 1. So it's like connected through 1. So these people in career districts are treated specially. They're allowed to train their future volunteer tributes, which technically is against the rules, but they're just treated different. And so they're like a middle ground. Like they're still districts. They still have to send their kids to the Hunger Games, but they feel more favored by the capital in general. And so people in career districts still have like a sense of belonging to a large group, but the ones who are trained to be like tributes feel more individual. They were trained up to be in the Hunger Games. They were like, I'm special, I'm different from these other people, I'm built for this. Basically, they had like a stronger sense of identity than just any old kid like in the career districts who weren't intended to be a tribute. But even though there's all these differences between the way that people in Panem perceive themselves, the truth is everybody in the whole country is just as susceptible to being punished by their government, whether they know it or not. And it can be for like literally anything. I mean, for example, you see the AVOXs for Katniss and Peeta's games. The first girl that was in books 1 and 2, and then I think mentioned in Mockingjay as well, the redheaded girl was the one that Katniss had seen trying to flee to 13. And Katniss says like she and the guy that she was with, they had had that capital look about them. They were capital citizens. They were part of the group that felt like we have the government on our side. We're important. We're from the top place to be. But that didn't matter at all. Because regardless of that personal sense of identity, regardless of the way that they'd been brought up to think about themselves, nothing was saving them from being subject to the government's sense of justice. The boy that girl was with ended up dying, and then the girl herself was turned into an AVOX, all because they were trying to flee the capital, because they weren't listening to what the government wanted from them. And then also this happens with Darius, who was a peacekeeper in District 12. The peacekeepers worked for the capital. They worked for the government within all these little districts. But that didn't really matter. He tried to save Gale from being lashed by the new head peacekeeper who comes in. I don't remember his name. Even though he had that like higher ranked identity as a peacekeeper, he still was severely punished. I mean, he was turned into an AVOX. He essentially was performing an act of rebellion against the capital, even though it didn't seem like he meant it like that. He was just trying to help Gale. And then there's also the interesting thing about peacekeepers being like separate from people in the districts and in the capital. They're the ones who are keeping the peace. They're important. They work for the government. They work for the capital, but then they all wear the same thing and they're faceless. Like they all wear like the same helmets. They all look the same. And so it's like, I'm sure someone who's a peacekeeper like has a strong sense of identity in that like profession, but at the same time, their profession calls for them to be one in the crowd, just like everyone else in the districts. The victors are put in an extremely unique position. They have a special identity assigned to them by the events of their games. They're distinct from everyone in Panem. They're different from people in their districts because they went through those games. They're different from people in the capital, again, because they went through the games. And because they were brought up in districts, but then they're able to like freely go into the capital, go into their home district, and then on their victory tour, they get a tour of the whole country. People in the capital don't even get that. People in the capital stay in the capital. People in their districts stay in their districts. Victors are the only ones who are allowed to have a government assigned tour of the entire country. They're constantly constantly in the public eye. They're often well loved across the whole nation, especially in the capital. And they're looked up to by those in the districts who are like, we can someday be like them if we win the Hunger Games. And then they're admired by those in the capital because, again, the capital eats up the Hunger Games. It's their entertainment. It's their reality TV. They don't really see them as people. They see them as characters in a show. But at the same time, being on this pedestal means that they're always in the eye of the government. President Snow especially. They're an instant target if they should say or do something that Snow doesn't like. And also they're usually pretty aware of like shitty things that are happening. They're usually aware of like how corrupt stuff in the government, in the like secret parts of the capital that most regular people don't have access to. Like, they're aware of that. The game specifically is what shifts the victors' identities. They start off as just like one in the crowd. They start off as a regular district citizen, and then their name is randomly picked from a bowl. And the second that they're reaped, they become one standing out in a crowd. In the first Hunger Games movie, you can literally see like everyone looks at Peeta when he's reaped, and they like are like, not me. You don't even really see him when Katniss goes up. You don't see him at all. He's just in the crowd. And the second that his name is drawn, everyone sees him. Everyone. And even though they are like special, they're like considered different than like everyone in the districts because like the capital has their eyes on them. They're like being in the public eye. They're being like prepped for the games and stuff. Even in the arena, they still are part of a group. I mean, their deaths they don't even have their names. When they're up there in the sky, dead, they don't have their names up there. They just have numbers. They're like disposable. They're just existing for the sake of the capital's entertainment. And so the victors are victors because they fought to be special enough to win. This is both like regarding skills, because of course you have to have the physical skill to be able to win one of the Hunger Games. You have to be skilled to be able to fight, kill, run, hide, any of those things. Like, you have to have some sort of skill that makes you different from everyone else who's out there dying. But then also like social skills come into play. Of course, there's the idea of sponsors. There's people who win because they like get gifted enough stuff. Katniss and Peeta still needed like gifts to win. They had the skills, but they were gonna die if they didn't get any gifts. And then of course, once they're declared victor, their social position is permanently elevated. They're just eternally marked with the stamp of celebrity. Their fight for survival switched from a more basic need of like pure survival instincts to a more socially based fight. Like, I need to be unique. I can't just be like some random kid that nobody cares about. And so they're forced to have a stronger sense of identity in order to survive the games and also survive post games. They need to be able to act in a way that the capital approves of in order to survive, because the capital gets rid of people that they don't like. Snow specifically does that. This is seen with Finnick Odair. If you've read the books, seen the movies, you know what happens to him. Basically, after his games, Snow forces him into spending time at night with people. And he survives this by going along with what Snow wants, because he doesn't want himself or his loved ones to be punished for not going along with it. And he used this to his advantage. He was smart. He traded secrets for time spent with him instead of money. You also see this with other victors who weren't able to protect the people that they loved. For example, Joanna Mason. Snow tried to do the same thing to her that he did to Finnick, and she didn't want to comply with that. And because of this, he kills everyone that she loves. She doesn't have anyone left. And this is seen both in the books, where she goes into the triangle with the Jabberjays fearlessly because she says that she doesn't have anyone left. Who are they going to use against her? And then in the movie, she's cussing people out.
Well, you know what?
She also is threatening Snow. She doesn't have anyone left. That's sadly the cost of being a victor, of being so irreversibly different than everyone else. Haymitch as well. He is an example of going too far because he won his Hunger Games by taking advantage of the force field that the game makers had put in the arena. And so Snow, the game makers, felt like they were making a fool of them, and they killed his family and his girlfriend. So him and Joanna are examples of like people who have a strong sense of identity, people who are different than everyone else, and they're punished for that. They're punished for standing out too much. So Peeta and Katniss are just something else. Katniss is the main protagonist of the series, Peeta as well. I mean, the books are written from Katniss's perspective, but Peeta goes hand in hand with her, of course. They serve as the perfect example of the idea of identity being necessary for survival in a district, and then having that need of identity for survival extending past that socially. Pre-reaping, pre-capital prep, in 12, the two were just regular district citizens. They wore commonplace clothing, and once they were reaped, they went into being prepped for the games, and their identities shifted just ever so slightly, at least for the sake of how they would be perceived by the public eye. Like I said earlier, their need for survival switched from oh, I need food, I need to not starve, I need to survive, to I need to impress these people in the capital, I need to impress the audience, I need to be better socially. And so their identity shifted from being someone who needed to be physically suited for the conditions of 12 to someone who would need to be socially fit to the conditions of the capital. Of course, there's the basic idea of visually representing this with their wardrobe. The second they're expected to be on camera, they're dressed differently, they're put more together, but also just socially, like I've been saying. Haymitch is dude, Katniss, you need to get your act together. You need to be more palatable for the capital, personality-wise. And then just as with any old victor, they needed to have a strong sense of identity, of being different than everybody else in order to survive in the arena. They only were able to survive the games together because they created this joint identity. They made themselves inseparable. They were just so special together that the audience was holy shit, we can't separate them. They're the star-crossed lovers. The audience just felt too attached to the both of them, and so the game maker Seneca Crane was forced to let them survive. Katniss's act of pulling out the berries had a sort of dual effect that I don't think she wasn't expecting at all. She won the hearts of people in Panem. They were like, oh my god, she loves him so much. She just couldn't imagine life without him. But then Snow's pissed the fuck off because he's like, girl, I know you didn't do this for Peeta. And so they won the games because of the berries, but then that also was exactly what caused them to be enemies of the capital. It's that sense of heightened individuality that led them to being a threat. People saw Katniss as more of a figure, an icon, a hero, instead of just someone who won a game. And of course, people tended to idolize those who won the games, on the capital especially, but people all over the districts were seeing Katniss as their mockingjay. They saw her as a leader, as a symbol of rebellion, as the person to follow in their fight for freedom against the capital. Katniss and Peeta didn't play the games properly. They played in spite of them. Alliances were historically built to break, but they weren't about that. They fought to keep loyalty to their alliance instead of loyalty to themselves and to the capital, which is exactly what Snow wants from all the victors. He wants the victors to be someone who fought for self-preservation, who is an example of bravery, of the reason why the games existed. They publicly, to the whole nation, defied the government of Panem by choosing to die together instead of one killing the other, as the game makers basically scripted for them. They were willing to die at their own hands instead of going along with the games, with Snow. The entire system of Panem was so fragile that a handful of berries could bring it down, as they say in the book and in the movie. And what that basically means is the idea of someone being distinct enough to stand out from even the victors, which is a group of celebrities. That was enough to light the spark of revolution. And the sense of identity is just so interesting because it's what saves them in the games. They're so different from everyone else that they're we need to have them both survive together. And then after the games, that individuality is exactly what led to Katniss specifically, but both Peeta and Katniss being heavily watched by Snow, because he's you guys are dangerous. You guys don't act the way that we want you to. You guys just do your own thing, and you can't be doing that. You need to go along with what I want. And then in Mockingjay, their individuality, their unique characteristics is exactly what Snow targets. Peeta was known to be very sociable. He chatted it up on the cameras. He had very good rapport with Caesar Flickerman. And so Snow takes this, he takes his TV personality characteristic and twists it for his own advantage. He tortures him into saying things that he wants him to say instead of the things that, you know, Peeta wants to say. He changes him for someone who speaks on television for himself and for Katniss, because he's always trying to protect Katniss, to someone who speaks on television for Snow and for the Capitol. They use his face, which is known and loved and trusted by everyone around Panem, and they turn him into the Capitol symbol in the rebellion, in the war. They use his identity for the Capitol side of the war. They use his identity. And then at the same time, this is just serving as Snow's punishment for Katniss. She was publicly known to be someone who protects the people that she loves. She volunteered as tribute for her little sister. That's why she first got into the spotlight. People were like, oh my god, that's like the cutest thing ever. And then of course, she and Peeta were known to be protecting each other. Her popularity boosted when she was known to be someone fighting for the love of her life, Peeta, in order to like have him survive the games alongside her. And then of course there's a part in Catching Fire when she publicly stands up against the head peacekeeper who is lashing Gale. Lashing? Is that a verb? Who's harming Gale, and like she's willing to risk being lashed herself to protect him. And so because of that, because of her identity of being someone who protects the people that she loves, Snow is also torturing her as he tortures Peeta. She's physically out of the reach of Snow. She's in District 13, like he can't get to her, but mentally he can by punishing Peeta. And so her personal identity as a protector was exactly what the Capitol attempted to exploit. And then of course it's exactly what led to her being the Mockingjay. I mean, she wanted to save Peeta. She wanted to end it all. She wanted to kill Snow because he harmed and killed people that she loved. And so the sense of identity, of individuality, is just really important in shaping the events of Panem and the Second Rebellion. The Capitol citizens were just compliant with their government because they felt like seen and heard by them. They felt like they were treated special, and so they were like, why would we go against the Capitol? On average, of course, there's the girl who tries to flee to District 13 and gets turned into an A-box, but like typically the people in the Capitol go along with what's happening. And then the victors are unique. They have their own special sense of identity, but that special position that they're in also lets them have access to secrets that like most people don't have. And so this is why like in Catching Fire, they're able to have these victors who team together for the sake of rebellion because they know everything that's happening, and they're able to like know, oh, who's gonna help, who's like, I mean, I think about it a lot. I'm like, how did they arrange that? It's because they know who would go along with the rebellion and who wouldn't. Katniss and Peeta were essentially just what made the Second Rebellion possible, because they were so different from all the other victors before them. And because of this, like the Capitol crumbled. As I said earlier, specifically Katniss was so different than anybody else in the games. I mean, she felt like a strong sense of loyalty to Rue, and then the people in 11 realized like she has her back even though she's from a different district, and they felt more loyal to each other instead of to the Capitol. And they also like this just helped break the barriers in order for people from different districts to be able to even like join a rebellion, because they saw that people in other districts weren't just like only worrying for themselves. They saw in Katniss the capability of people along different districts to work together. And essentially the Capitol crumbled because of this, because the people in Panem realized they were more than just one in a crowd. They no longer felt like they just had to go along with everything. They no longer felt like identityless faces in a crowd. They felt like individuals who could make a difference. And then of course the final fate of Panem is sealed by Katniss. She's like just everything. She saw that Coin's intentions were kind of to just go along with what Snow had been doing, but like instead of it being Snow in charge, it's her now. And so she was like, you know what? If this is the end, like, oh well. She saw herself as a necessary sacrifice for the success of Panem, and she killed Quinn. And of course she survived because she's the main character, and because she did that, Panem was able to finally start over. They eliminated the death and destruction of governments past. They switched from a totalitarian dictatorship to a democratic, constitutional republic, which was important because it meant that people of Panem felt more seen and heard. They felt important. They felt like they had a sense of individuality, of identity. They had a president who was voted in by the people, for the people. Yeah, so that was a lot of words that I had to say. I love the Hunger Games a lot, and it's just really interesting to just think about everything. Suzanne Collins is like a genius, actually, real and true, and I just really love it. I love the books, I love the movies, I love everything about it, and I guess if you're still here, that means that you do too. Thank you for watching this video. This was really fun to make. I never know how to end a video.